continuing to...
Welcome to Umbrella Rebellion. I'm Marcy.
And I'm Dee.
We are finding healing after leaving a cult.
We will be discussing abuse and personal experience with the ATI, IBLP, and fundamental churches.
Trigger warning. This podcast may contain descriptions of various forms of abuse. Please take care for your safety and well-being while you are listening.
If the content becomes too much for you to handle, please turn this off. We hope to expose harmful teachings that lead to and justify abuse,
with the hope that those that are experiencing abuse can find support and escape from it.
Welcome to Umbrella Rebellion's Culty Book Club. Totally different night. Usually I'm doing this on, pardon me, I don't want to put my hand in front of that camera. Usually doing it on, there we go, Saturdays, but it's soccer season, so my son has soccer games pretty much every weekend from now until eternity. I don't know how long the soccer season is, but it's a couple of months for sure. Welcome in. Let's see. I'm like so out of it recently. It has been a difficult couple of weeks. The got a cold or something running through a house or whatever, and kind of wiped me out. I guess we'll wait a few minutes, see if anybody comes and hangs out with us to read this book with us. We are on chapter 5. We are kind of in the middle of it. And I completely forgot what we read last week or the week before, whatever it was when we last read it. Did I do one on Sunday? I think I did one on Sunday. It's been one of them weeks where I don't remember what the heck I've done. So we are on chapter 5, and we're going to be continuing that here in just a minute. If you are new here and you don't know, we are reading The Body Keeps the Score. I have a playlist on the Ubes of Tubes that you can catch up with us where we're at if you haven't been hanging out with us. Because lately, I haven't having nobody hang out with me. It's just been me, myself, and I. Okay, anyway. All right, well, let's just get to this since it's just me here reading to myself. All right, we stopped off on the section called titled How We Become Human. In Porges' grand theory, the VVC evolved the mammals, and I forget what the VVC was. Hold on, let me go back. The ventral vagal complex. All right, that's right. We were talking about the vagus nerve. All right. So, in Porges' grand theory, the VVC, ventral vagus complex, evolved in mammals to support an increasingly complex social life. All mammals, including human beings, band together to mate, nurture their young, defend against common enemies, and coordinate hunting and food acquisition. The more efficient the VVC synchronizes the activity of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, the better the physiology of each individual will be attuned to that of other members of the tribe. Thinking about the VVC in this way illuminates how parents naturally help their kids to regulate themselves. I was not capable of that. Newborn babies are not very social. They sleep most of the time and wake up when they're hungry or wet. After having been fed, they may spend a little time looking around, fussing, or staring, but they will soon be asleep again, following their own internal rhythms. Early in life, their They early in life, they are pretty much at the mercy of the alternating tides of their sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, and their reptilian brains runs most of the show. But day by day, as we coo and smile and cluck at them, we stimulate the growth of synchronicity in the developing VVC. These interactions help to bridge our baby's emotional arousal systems into sync with their surroundings. The VVC controls sucking, swallowing, facial expressions, and the sounds produced by the larynx. When these functions are stimulated in an infant, they are accompanied by a sense of pleasure and safety, which helps create a foundation for all future social behavior. As my friend Ed Tronick taught me a long time ago, the brain is a cultural organ. Experience shapes the brain. Being in tune with other members of our species via the VVC is enormously rewarding. What begins as an attuned play of mother and child continues with the rhythmicity of a good basketball game, the synchrony of tango dancing, and the harmony of choral singing or playing a piece of jazz or chamber music, all of which foster a deep sense of pleasure and connection. We can speak of trauma when that system fails, when you beg for your life, but the assailant ignores your pleas, when you are a terrified child lying in a bed, hearing your mother scream as her boyfriend is not so kind to her physically. When you see your buddy trapped under a piece of metal that you're not strong enough to lift. When you want to push away the priest who is abusing you, but you're afraid you'll be punished. Immobilization is at the root of most traumas. When that occurs, the DVC is likely to take over. Your heart slows down, your breathing becomes shallow and zombie like. You lose touch with yourself and your surroundings. You disassociate, faint, and collapse. Defend or relax. Steve Porges helped me realize that the natural state of mammals is to be somewhat on guard. However, in order to feel emotionally close to another human being, our defensive system must temporarily shut down. In order to play, mate, and nurture our young, the brain needs to turn off its natural vigilance. Many traumatized individuals are too hypervigilant to enjoy the ordinary pleasures of that life has to offer, while others are too numb to absorb new experiences or to be alert to signs of real danger. When the smoke detector of the brain when the smoke detectors of the brain malfunction, people no longer run when they should be trying to escape or fight back when they should be defending themselves. The landmark ACE Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which I'll discuss in more detail in chapter 9, showed that women showed that women who had an early history of abuse and neglect were 7 times more likely to be raped in adulthood. Women who, as children, had witnessed their mother being assaulted by their partners had a vastly increased chance to fall victim to DV. Many people feel safe as long as they can limit their social contact to superficial conversations. But actual physical contact can trigger intense reactions. However, as Porges points out, achieving any sort of deep intimacy, a close embrace, sleeping with a mate, and smacks requires allowing oneself to experience immobilization without fear. Good point. It is especially challenging for traumatized people to discern when they are actually safe and to be able to activate their defenses when they are in danger. This requires having experiences that can restore the sense of physical safety, a topic to which we'll return many times in the chapters that follow. New approaches to treatment. If we understand that traumatized children and adults get stuck in fight, flight, or in chronic shutdown, how do we help them to deactivate these defensive maneuvers that once ensured their survival? Some gifted people who work with trauma survivors know how to do this intuitively. Steve Gross used to run the play program at the trauma center. Steve often walked around the clinic with a brightly colored beach ball, and when he saw angry or frozen kids in the waiting room, he would flash them a big smile. The kids rarely responded. Then, a little later, he would return and accidentally drop his ball close to where the kid was sitting. As Steve leaned over to pick it, he'd nudge it gently toward the kid, who'd usually give a half hearted push in return. Gradually, Steve got a back and forth going, and before long, you'd see smiles on both faces. For simple, rhythmically attuned from simply rhythmically attuned movements, Steve had created a small, safe place where the social engagement system could begin to reemerge. In the same way, severely traumatized people may get more out of simply helping to arrange chairs before a meeting or joining others in tapping out a musical rhythm on the chair seats than they would from sitting in those same chairs and discussing the failures in their life. One thing is certain: yelling at someone who is already out of control can only lead to further dysregulation. Just as your dog cowers if you shout and wags his tail when you speak in a high sing song, we humans respond to harsh voices with fear, anger, or shutdown, and to playful tones by opening up and relaxing. We simply cannot help but respond to these indicators of safety or danger. Sadly, our educational system, as well as many of the methods that profess to treat trauma, tend to bypass this emotional engagement system and focus instead on recruiting the cognitive capacities of the mind. Despite the well documented effects of anger, fear, and anxiety on the ability to reason, many programs continue to ignore the need to engage the safety system of the brain before trying to promote new ways of thinking. The last things that should be cut from school schedules are chorus, physical education, recess, and anything else involving movement, play, and joyful engagement. When children are oppositional, defensive, numbed out, or enraged, it's also important to recognize that such bad behavior may repeat action patterns that were established to survive serious threats, even if they are immensely upsetting or off putting. Porges's work has had a profound effect on how my trauma center colleagues and I organize the treatment of abused children and traumatized adults. It's true that we would probably have developed a therapeutic yoga program for women at some point, given that yoga had proved so successful in helping them calm down and get in touch with their disassociated bodies. We would also have been likely to experiment with a theater program in the Boston inner city schools, with the karate program for grape survivors called Impact Model Mugging. That sounds weird. And with play techniques and body modalities like sensory stimulation that have now been used with survivors around the world. All of these and more will be explored in part 5. But the polyvagal theory helped us understand and explain why all these desperate, unconventional techniques work so well. It enabled us to become more conscious of combining top down approaches to activate social engagement with bottom up methods to calm the physical tension in the body. We were more open to the valve of other age old non pharmacological approaches to health that have long been practiced outside Western medicine, ranging from breath exercises, parani- pranam- pranayama, pranayama. I don't know how to pronounce that. And chanting to martial arts like Qigong, to drumming and group singing and dancing. All rely on interpersonal rhythms, visceral awareness, and vocal and facial communication, which help shift people out of fight flight states, reorganize their perception of danger, and increase their capacity to manage relationships. The body keeps the score. If the memory of trauma is encoded in the viscera, in heartbreaking and gut wrenching emotions, in autoimmune disorders and skeletal muscular problems, and if the mind brain visceral communication is the royal road to emotion regulation, this demands a radical shift in our therapeutic assumptions. Chapter 6: Losing your body, losing yourself. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Rainer Maria Rilke, Letters to a Young Poet. Sherry walked into my office with her shoulders slumped, her chin nearly touching her chest. Even before we spoke a word, her body was telling me that she was afraid to face the world. I also noticed that her long sleeves only partially covered the scabs on her forearms. After sitting down, she told me in a high pitched monotone that she couldn't stop herself from picking at the skin on her arms and chest until she bled. As far back as Sherry could remember, her mother had run a foster home, and their house was often packed with as many as 15 strange, disruptive, frightening kids who disappeared as suddenly as they arrived. Sherry had grown up taking care of these transient children, feeling that there was no room for her and her needs. I know I wasn't wanted, she told me. I'm not sure when I first realized that, but I've thought about things that my mother said to me, and the signs were always there. She'd tell me, "You know, I don't think you belong in this family. I think they gave us the wrong baby." And she'd say it with a smile on her face. But of course, people often pretend to joke when they say something serious. That's awful. Over the years, our research team has repeatedly found that chronic emotional abuse and neglect can be just as devastating as physical abuse and sexual molestation. Sherry turned into Sherry turned out to be a living example of these findings. Not being seen, not being known, and having nowhere to turn to feel safe is devastating at any age, but it is particularly destructive for young children who are still trying to find their place in the world. Sherry had graduated from college, but she now worked in a joyless clerical job, lived alone with her cats, and had no close friends. When I asked her about men, she told me that her only relationship had been with a man who'd kidnapped her while she was on a college vacation in New Orleans. Ugh. He'd held her captive and raped her repeatedly for 5 consecutive days. She remembered having been curled up, terrified, and frozen for most of that time, until she realized she could try to get away. She escaped by simply walking out while he was in the bathroom. When she called her mother for help, her mother refused to take the call. Sherry finally managed to get home with assistance from a DV shelter. Sherry told me that she started to pick at her skin because it gave her some relief from feeling numb. The physical sensations made her feel more alive, but also deeply ashamed. She knew she was addicted to these actions, but could not stop them. Oh, my foot is asleep. She consulted many mental health professionals before me and had been questioned repeatedly about her SI behavior. She'd also been subjected to involuntary hospitalization by a psychiatrist who refused to treat her unless she could promise that she would never pick at herself again. Wow, that's terrible. However, in my experience, patients who cut themselves or pick at their skin, like Sherry, are seldom wanting to unalive themselves, but are trying to make themselves feel better in the only way they know. This is a difficult concept for many people to understand. As I discussed in the previous chapter, the most common response to distress is to seek out people who like and trust to help us and give us the courage to go on. We may also calm down by engaging in a physical activity like biking or going to the gym. We start learning these ways of regulating our feelings from the first moment someone feeds us when we're hungry, covers us when we're cold, or rocks us when we're hurt or scared. But if no one has ever looked at you with loving eyes or broken out in a smile when she sees you, if no one has rushed to help you but instead said, "Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about," then you need to discover other ways of taking care of yourself. You are likely to experiment with anything: rugs, alcohol, binge eating, or cutting that offers some kind of relief. While Sherry dutifully came to every appointment and answered my questions with great sincerity, I did not feel we were making the sort of vital connection that is necessary for therapy to work. Struck by how frozen and uptight she was, I suggested that she see Liz, a massage therapist I had worked with previously. During their first meeting, Liz positioned Sherry on the massage table, then moved to the end of the table and gently held Sherry's feet. Lying there with her eyes closed, Sherry suddenly yelled in panic, "Where are you?" Somehow, Sherry had lost track of Liz, even though Liz was right there, with her hands on Sherry's feet. Sherry was one of the first patients who taught me about the extreme disconnection from the body that so many people with histories of trauma and neglect experience. I discovered that my professional training, with its focus on understanding and insight, had largely ignored the relevance of the living, breathing body, the foundation of ourselves. Sherry knew that picking her skin was a destructive thing to do and that it was related to her mother's neglect, but understanding the source of the impulse made no difference in helping her control it. Losing your body. Once I was alerted to this, I was amazed to discover how many of my patients told me they could not feel whole areas of their body. Sometimes I'd ask them to close their eyes and tell me what I had put into their outstretched hands, whether it was a car key, a quarter, or a can opener. They often could not even guess what they were holding. Their sensory perceptions simply weren't working. I talked this over with my friend Alexander McFarlane in Australia, who had observed the same phenomenon. In his laboratory in Adelaide, wait, sorry. He had studied the question, how do we know without looking at it what we're holding a car key? Oh, how do we know without looking at it that we're holding a car key? Recognizing an object in the palm of your hand requires sensing its shape, weight, temperature, texture, and position. Each of those distinct sensory experiences is transmitted to a different part of the brain, which then needs to integrate them into a single perception. McFarlane found that people with PTSD often have trouble putting the picture together. It's interesting. When one senses when one when our senses become muffled, we no longer feel fully alive. In an article called "What is an Emotion?" 1884, William James, the father of American psychology, reported a striking case of sensory instability in a woman he interviewed. Open quote, mm, open quote, "I have no human sensation," end quote, she told him, open quote. "I am surrounded by all that can render life happy and agreeable. Still, to me, the faculty of enjoyment and of feeling is wanting. Each of my senses, each part of my proper self, is as it were separated from me and can no longer afford me any feeling. This impossibility seems to depend upon a void which I feel in the front of my head, and to be due to the diminution of the sensibility over the whole surface of my body. For it seems to me that I never actually reach the objects which I touch. All of this would be a small matter enough, but for its frightful result, which is that of the impossibility of any other kind of feeling and of any sort of enjoyment. Although I experience a need and desire of them that render my life an incomprehensible torture. End quote. This response to trauma raises an important question. How can traumatized people learn to integrate ordinary sensory experiences so that they can live with the natural flow of feeling and feel secure and complete in their bodies? How do we know we're alive? Most early neuroimaging studies of traumatized people were like those we've seen in Chapter 3. They focused on how subjects reacted to specific reminders of the trauma. Then, in 2004, my colleague Ruth Lanus, who scanned Stan and Utes Lawrence's brains, posed a new question. What happens in the brains of trauma survivors when they are not thinking about the past? Her studies on the idling brain, the default state network, DSN, opened up a whole new chapter in understanding how trauma affects self awareness, specifically sensory self awareness. Dr. Linus recruited a group of 16 normal Canadians to lie in a brain scanner while thinking about nothing in particular. This is not easy for anyone to do. As long as we are awake, our brains are churning. But she asked them to focus their attention on their breathing and try to empty their brains as much as possible. She then repeated the same experiment with 18 people who had histories of severe chronic childhood abuse. What is your brain doing when you have nothing in particular on your mind? I wouldn't know. I don't think I've ever had nothing on my mind. It turns out that you pay attention to yourself. The default state activates the brain areas that work together to create your sense of self. When Ruth looked at the scans of her normal subjects, she found activation of DSN regions that previous researchers had described. I like to call this the mohawk of self awareness. The midline structures of the brain, starting out right above our eyes, running through the center of the brain all the way to the back. All these midline structures are involved in our sense of self. The largest bright region at the back of the brain is the posterior cingulate, which gives us a physical sense of where we are, our internal GPS. It is strongly connected to the medial prefrontal cortex, MPFC, the watchtower I discussed in Chapter 4. This connection doesn't show up on the scan because fMRI can't measure it. It is also connected with brain areas that register sensation coming from the rest of the body, the insula, which relays messages from the viscera to the emotional centers, the parietal lobes, which integrate sensory information, and the anterior cingulate, which coordinates emotions and thinking. All of these areas contribute to consciousness. And they have a picture for those on the not YouTube. They have a picture of the brain and the different areas that he was talking about. Interesting. I have brain pictures. Locating the self. So underneath the picture, he has this description. The mohawk of self-awareness, starting from the front of the brain at right. This consists of the orbital prefrontal cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate, the posterior cingulate, and the insula. An individual with histories of chronic trauma, the same region shows sharply decreased activity, making it difficult to register internal states and assessing the personal relevance of incoming information. This totally explains why some of these therapies actually work for me. That is absolutely wild to me. being able to understand like what I've been doing in therapy is kind of wild. The contrast with the scans of the 18 chronic PTSD patients with severe early life trauma were startling. There were almost no activation of any of the self-sensing areas of the brain. The MPFC, the anterior cingulate, the parietal cortex, and the insula did not light up at all. The only area that showed a slight activation was the posterior cingulate, which is responsible for basic orientation in space. There could be only one explanation for such results. In response to the trauma itself and in coping with the dread that persisted long afterward, these patients had learned to shut down the brain areas that transmit the visceral feelings and emotions that accompany and define terror. Yet in everyday life, those same brain areas are responsible for registering the entire range of emotions and sensations that form the foundation of our self awareness, our sense of who we are. What we witnessed here was a tragic adaptation. In an effort to shut off terrifying sensations, they also deadened their capacity to feel fully alive. The disappearance of medial prefrontal activation could explain why so many traumatized people lose their sense of purpose and direction. I used to be surprised by how often my patients asked me for advice about the most ordinary things, and then by how rarely they followed it. I think that's the bane of every therapist's existence is telling people how they can do better and they don't do it. Now I understand that their relationship with their own inner reality was impaired. How could they make decisions or put any plan into action if they couldn't define or or to be more precise, what the sensations in their bodies, the basics of all emotions, were trying to tell them? The lack of self awareness in victims of chronic childhood trauma is sometimes so profound that they cannot recognize themselves in a mirror. Brain scans show that this is not the result of mere inattention. The structures in charge of self recognition may be knocked out along with the structures related to self experience. When Ruth Lanius showed me her study, a phrase from my classical high school education came back to me. The mathematician Archimedes, teaching about the lever, is supposed to have said, quote, "Give me a place to stand and I will move the world." Or as the great 20th century body therapist Moshe Feldenkrais, I don't know how to pronounce that, put it, quote, "You can't do what you want till you know what you're doing." Okay. The implications are clear. To feel present, you have to know where you are and to be aware of what is going on with you. If the self sensing system breaks down, you need to find ways to reactivate it. That is so interesting. I wonder if, like, is that proprioception? Like, no, interoception. That's interoception, right? Like knowing what's going on in your body and stuff. And, autistic people that have difficulty with interoception, is that why they struggle sometimes with like navigating through life? Like, that's pretty freaking wild. Speaking, an experience of someone who has a child with autism and I suspect issues with interoception, kind of makes sense to me about some of the things happening with that child. So, this book is really pretty freaking amazing. I know like a lot of people like say that if you're not a clinician, you shouldn't read it because it's kind of triggering and everything, but I don't know, I'm just kind of weird like that. And I love these kinds of things. I love knowing how things work. And I'm kind of always been fascinated with brains. So, hello! You made it! How are you doing tonight? Hi! I've been sitting here reading to myself. I was just talking about a section that we just read was talking about how people with trauma don't know, oh, okay. Don't know, like, what's going on in their bodies, and they can't always sense, like, "Hey, Smitty!" They can't always sense, like, people's touch or, things like he talked about putting, like, a key in your hand, and they couldn't even describe it with their eyes closed because they just don't have their senses are so frazzled, and they're so desensitized to their own self. And I was talking about how I have an autistic child, and one of their struggles is with interoception, which interoception is knowing what's going on in your own body. And add trauma onto that, and it's just like, no wonder they're having such a struggle with some things. It makes so much sense to me now, and I'm trying to think, like, where what can I do to help them with that portion? So we're gonna read more about it. I'm hoping it's gonna help me. Yeah, right? So this section is called the self-sensing system. It was fascinating to see how much Sherry benefited from her massage therapy. She felt more relaxed and adventurous in her day-to-day life, and and sh- she was also more relaxed and open with me. She became truly involved in her therapy and was genuinely curious about her behavior, thoughts, and feelings. She stopped picking at her skin, and when summer came, she started to spend evenings sitting outside on her stoop, chatting with her neighbors. She even she even joined a church choir, a wonderful experience of group synchrony. It was at about this time that I met Antonio Damasio at a small think tank in Dan that wait at a small think tank that Dan Satcher, the chair of the psychology department at Harvard, had organized. In a series of brilliant scientific articles and books, Damasio clarified the relationship among body states, emotions, and survival. A neurologist who has treated hundreds of people with various forms of brain damage, he became fascinated with consciousness and with identifying the areas of the brain necessary for knowing what you feel. He has devoted his career to mapping out what is responsible for our experience for self. The feeling of what happens is, for me, his most important book. The feeling of what happens. Interesting. That's gonna have to go on the list of books. Hold on. I'm gonna have to add this to my wish list. Because if I don't add it, I'm gonna be like, what was that book? Let's see. The feeling of what happens. I just want to put it on a list. I don't want to get it. Where is add to my? Oh, I'll just heart it. Okay, that works. Okay, added it. Um, the feeling of what happens is for me the most important book, and reading it was a revelation. Damasio starts by pointing out the deep divide between our sense of self and the sensory life of our bodies. As he poetically explains, open quote, sometimes we use our minds not to discover facts, but to hide them. One of the things the screen hides most effectively in our body, wait, one of the things the screen hides most effectively is the body, our own body. by which I mean the ends of its interiors. Like a veil thrown over the skin to secure its modesty, the screen partially removes from the mind the inner states of the body, those that constitute the flow of life as it wanders in the journey of each day. End quote. For some reason, that's just like over my head. He goes on to describe how this screen can work in our favor by enabling us to attend to pressing problems in the outside world. Yet it has a cost. Open quote. It tends to prevent us from sensing the possible origin and nature of what we call self. End quote. Building on the century-old work of William James, Damasio argues that the core of our self-awareness rests on the physical sensations that convey the inner states of the body. This is a excerpt from the book, I believe. Primordial feelings provide a direct experience of one's own living body, wordless, unadorned, and connected to nothing but sheer existence. These primordial feelings reflect the current state of the body along varied dimensions, along the scale that ranges from pressure to pain, and they originate at the level of the brain stem rather than the cerebral cortex. All feelings of emotions are complex musical variations on primordial feelings. Our sensory world takes shape even before we are born. In the womb, we feel amniotic fluid against our skin. We hear the faint sounds of rushing blood and the digestive tract at work. We pitch and roll with our mother's movements. After birth, physical sensations defines our relationship to ourselves and to our surroundings. We start off being our wetness, hunger, sensation, and sleepiness. We start off being, our being is, wetness, hunger, sensation, and sleepiness. A cacophony of incomprehensible sounds and images presses in on our pristine nervous system. Even after we acquire consciousness and language, our bodily sensing system provides crucial feedback on our moment to moment condition. Its constant hum communicates changes in our viscera and the muscles of our face, torso, and extremities that signal pain and comfort, as well as urges such as hunger and sexual arousal. What is taking place around us all affects our physical sensations. Seeing someone we recognize, hearing particular sounds, a piece of music, a siren, or sensing a shift in temperature all change our focus of attention and without our being aware of it, prime our subsequent thoughts and actions. As we have seen, the job of the brain is to constantly monitor and evaluate what is going on within and around us. These evaluations are transmitted by chemical messages in the brain stream and a brainstream, bloodstream, and the electrical messages in our nerves, causing subtle or dramatic changes throughout the body and brain. These shifts usually occur entirely without conscious input or awareness. The subcortical regions of the brain are astonishingly efficient in regulating our breathing, heartbeat, digestion, hormone secretion, and immune system. However, these systems can become overwhelmed if we are challenged by an ongoing threat or even the perception of a threat. This accounts for the wide array of physical problems researchers have documented in traumatized people. Even the okay. Yet our conscious self also plays a vital role in maintaining our inner equilibrium. We need to register and act on our physical sensations to keep our bodies safe. Realizing we're realizing we're cold compels us to put on a sweater. Feeling hungry or spacey tells us our blood sugar is low and spurs us to get a snack. The pressure of a full bladder sends us to the bathroom. Damasio points out that all of the brain structures that register background feelings are located near areas that control basic housekeeping functions, such as breathing, appetite, elimination, and sleep wake cycles. Open quote. This is because the consequence of having emotion and attention are entirely related to the fundamental business of managing life within the organism. It is not possible to manage life and maintain homeostatic balance without data on the current state of the organism's body. End quote. Damasio calls these housekeeping areas of the brain the proto-self because they create the wordless knowledge that underlies our conscious sense of self. Whew. Oh. See how long this next section is. All right, I'm gonna read one more section, and then if y'all want to get up in the box and hang out with me and talk for a little bit, we can. The self under threat. In 2000, Damasio and his colleagues published an article in the world's foremost scientific publication, Science, which reported that reliving a strong negative emotion causes significant change in the brain areas that receive nerve signals from the muscles, gut, and skin, areas that are crucial for regulating basic bodily functions. The team's brain scan showed that recalling an emotional event from the past causes us to actually re experience the visceral sensations felt during the original event. Each type of emotion produced a characteristic pattern distinct from the others. For example, a particular part of the brainstem was active in sadness and anger, but not in happiness or fear. All of these brain regions are below the limbic system, to which emotions are traditionally assigned. Yet we acknowledge their involvement every time we use one of the common expressions that link strong emotions with the body. You make me sick. It made my skin crawl. I was all choked up. My heart sank. He makes me bristle. The elementary self system in the brain stem and limbic system is massively activated when people are faced with the threat of annihilation, which results in an overwhelming sense of fear and terror accompanied by intense physiological arousal. To people who are reliving a trauma, nothing makes sense. They are trapped in a life or death situation, a state of paralyzing fear or blind rage. Mind and body are constantly aroused as if they are in imminent danger. They startle in response to the slightest noises and are frustrated by small irritations. Their sleep is chronically disturbed, and food often loses its sensual pleasures. This in turn can trigger desperate amounts to this in turn can trigger desperate attempts to shut those feelings down by freezing and disassociation. Oh, thank you for the gifts. Thank you. Appreciate that. How do people regain control when their animal brains are stuck in a fight for survival? If what goes on deep inside our animal brains dictates how we feel, and if our body sensations are orchestrated by subcortical subconscious brain structures, how much control over them can we actually have? And that's the end of that section. And the next section is agency, owning your life. That'll be good. So, to figure out, ow, I have a little tracker on my arm and it was like digging into me and my skin's almost raw because of it. All right. If anybody wants to come up in a box and chit chat, y'all are welcome. Change my view on the YouTubes, the tubes of you. Oh, thank you. If you want to catch up, I have a playlist on the other site that we're on. Hello, friend. Hi. I am. It's been kind of a rough couple of weeks, couple of months, but I'm hanging in there. Yeah. How y'all doing? Yeah. How have y'all been doing? The move and everything. Okay. Okay. He's always working on something, isn't he? Nice. Yay. That's awesome. I'm excited for y'all. Girl, you said yeah, we have to record our episode and I'm like, "What the hell were we supposed to do? I totally forgot." It's probably in one of our messages or our text or something. We'll have to go back. The only one who forgot what we were supposed to talk about. Yeah. I know. I'm like, I just texted the kids today. I'm like, what are we doing for Thanksgiving? Nobody's mentioned nothing. Mm-mm. Oh, they know it's not me. It's my husband. He does it all. I lucked out. No, I usually help. Like we get all the kids to like do a dish and stuff and like everybody pitches in because it's just too much for one person. So, and we have 5 grown out of 6, so, they're all capable. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yes. Did y'all used to do like the bringing in the New Year service where like they would oh, yes. Yeah. I never went to one because I was a rebel. Mhm. Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. That's probably why, and that's why I was asking because I figured it was a terrible, terrible night for you in your childhood. Oh, That's hilarious. I know. Yeah, some of our best New Year's Eves have been just sitting by the fire drinking, getting drunk. Nice. Yeah. Oh man, that's funny. Mm. Y'all really got y'all really got down with the devil that night, huh? There you go. I don't play. That's funny. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he can team me. I'll do an episode, he can do an episode. Mhm. Mhm. Like the windsock, yeah. Mhm. I'm currently in my bedroom in a corner. Th I have a mini fridge right next to me. You do? Yeah, that's where we hide the alcohol from the non-legal people. Oh my goodness. That'll change his mind having a mini fridge. He'll be a co-host if you have a mini fridge. Oh, that's hilarious. I love it. Oh my god, I need to fly out and come visit y'all when y'all get it up and running. Oh my god, yeah. Oops. Yeah, I'm actually starting. Hey, how are you doing? Long time no see. I've actually gotten out in public lately and it's been kind of interesting but also exhausting. So I'm trying to build up my stamina to actually do, social things again cuz I've pretty much been homebound for about 2 years, you know. Yeah, I think so. I think I had serotonin syndrome for about 2 months. And I'm thinking, no, it was worse than that. I was having like palpitations and brain fog and dizziness, and it was bad. I went to the ER like 3 times in a week. Yeah. So, and then I went through withdrawals because I took myself off the meds. I was like, because serotonin syndrome can unalive you. And I was like, withdrawals, unalive. I think I'll go with withdrawals. Thank you, Ashley. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, other than my kids' soccer games, I really don't have a whole lot going. So, well, that and, kids coming and going, other than that, my life is completely unpredictable, but mostly boring. So, um, yeah, definitely. I guess after Thanksgiving we'll just touch base and figure out which topic we were talking about. I can't even remember. Was it like comparing IBLP and IFB? I think so. Mhm. Mhm. I did not know. I saw his story. And I'll be honest with you, I don't remember him like ever like performing, but I know like there was several different like prominent families that performed during IBLP things. So like I was slightly removed from it to an extent because I was an adult and I was in the Air Force at the same time. And then when I got out of the Air Force is when I went to go work at headquarters. I was only there for 3 months. So, like, my experience is very, like, small in that world, but it was such a big part of my life because it kind of enmeshed into the IFB world for me because my sister is 20 years younger than me and she grew up in it. Actually, she's a result of the cult. Um because she's a reversal baby. And when they got into the cult and started homeschooling and going to the homeschool conferences, they would talk about getting reversals because, God had to be in control of your family. And my mom and dad decided that they were going to do that. And they had one more child, and she's 20 years younger than me. Oh, well, it's funny because my best friend, her mom got pregnant, and little sister is 18 years younger than her. So we both had siblings super young, and we were basically raising our siblings. So I mean, like I wasn't in the home at that time. Like I was in and out of my parents' house, as an adult, but I was in the Air Force, so It w I went to Korea right after, I was stationed in South Korea right after she was born. Like, I was home on leave before I went to Korea. My grandfather had a stroke and my little sister was born. Mhm. Yeah. So that I was supposed to go to Germany after Korea, and then I decided to go to Florida. And that's how I got into IFB. Yep. I'm so sorry. That's terrible. You were 16 when you were wait. No, her sister was 16. Her older sister was 16. Oh, wow. Yeah, she's reconnected. Catholic. Wow. So have all 5 of the siblings connected at this point? You have 5 sisters and 2 brothers. Okay, so you have all reconnected. I thought I remembered that, but I didn't wanna answer for you. So I was like, I can't remember if she's met all of them and reconnected. I need to put out PSA for everyone because I get a lot of people that want to come on the podcast that are like they come out of the IFB, which I totally get that. I mean, I was raised IFB, my experience is IFB, so they are automatically like, oh, you have IFB people on. Well, I get that, yeah, but I also want anyone from any cult or had experienced religious trauma in any way from any religion. I want them to come on because, like, for instance, even like, okay, Tabitha wasn't did she didn't go to a roll off home. She was in a WASP program, still TTI. You know what I mean? It was a religious space. Yeah. Chat, share their story on the podcast that just raised in like the independent fundamental Baptist. Yeah. You know, obviously I've had that type as well, but I want to have yeah, to branch out a little bit. I know 2 people who were in Seventh-day Adventist. I can reach out to them and see if they might be interested in one is actually she has a book coming out in March. So she's actually booking podcasts soon. So mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I know. I wish I had more time to have more people come on and tell their stories. One of the things that I really wanted to do is try to get more men to share their stories because all right, love. It was so good to see you. Thanks for coming by and saying hi. Um, but yeah, I think there's not enough stories and not enough, you know, visibility for men who have been in this and how it I no, I was not in the documentary, but the cult I was in is associated with that. Um so the I just to make it more so people know what it is, because it's hard to write it all out in the bio. There's only so many um characters, but no, that was a hard documentary to watch for sure. The Let Us Pray one. Me too. Mhm. Right. Right. Mhm. Oh, okay. So it's IFB in name, but more SBC. Oh, okay. Mhm. Whoa. Whoa. Mhm. Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Going on, like the news is getting involved. There's these, and she was really like playing it off that it was these women were causing. She was something that happened when they were younger and they had 15 years to come forward and they haven't until just now. They were
No.
in the spotlight and they
Uh-uh.
want their fame and they want whatever. And
Mm. Yeah, that's how they always like to frame it because, Oh, wow. Zayev, is that how you pronounce your name, Zayev? You're from the church that inspired the Preacher Boys podcast. So you went to the same church that Eric Skwarczynski. I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's Skwarczynski. Did you? Oh, that's awesome. Mhm. Oh, wow. I read one of her books. It was really good. I can't remember. It was one of her first books. I don't remember. Mm.
Little brain fart there. No longer invisible.
It was one of her nonfiction books. I mean, no, one of her fiction books. Meh. Okay. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Oh God.
And it was a whole thing. She basically got beat for it, and then like the deacons all came over and told her she was essentially a slut and all this. I mean, it was just yeah. And then her and this boy, they fell in love, and they were trying to like run away together. So they were all planning to work at this youth camp as counselors and run away together. Can't tell you the rest. It's really good.
I would spoil it for you. You gotta read it. Okay. Jesse Rolls Church. Okay, I'm not familiar with the West Coast in
Something in that family, really blurry, big, like
Gabe. Oh wow. You just know all the IFBs. I know. He runs the church now. Mm. Oh, they got married, yeah. So Zaive, I was in Ruckman land. So yeah. Smitty. Nick, you married her. That's hilarious. Oh goodness. Well, she can't now anyway. He's married, she's married, it's just it would be too much drama. Look, if you really want to hash this out, I say get on the podcast. All right, guys. Well, I need to get going. It's time to wrap this up. It was so good talking to you and catching up. All right. We'll touch base after. Yeah, you're welcome. And we'll touch base after Thanksgiving. Alrighty. If somebody has not told you today or ever, I am proud of you.